I had another man's sweat drying on my skin when I walked into our bedroom and saw my husband crying in the dark. The air still smelled like hotel soap and cologne that did not belong to Jason. My thighs were still sore. I had just given myself to someone else, completely and willingly, and I was not ready for the guilt to hit me like that. Not this soon. Not this hard. Jason did not look at me. He just sat on the edge of our bed, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. He was not shouting. He was not accusing. He was breaking, quietly, painfully, in front of the woman who just destroyed him. And I stood there, frozen. Half undressed. Full of shame. Wanting to go back in time, but knowing I never could. Thank you to all my subscribers for coming back to this channel. Your support means more than you know. To all the new and returning viewers who have not subscribed yet, thank you for watching. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. It is the fuel that powers every story shared here. And please, if you feel something, drop a comment. Let me know what this story brings up in you. Now let me introduce myself. My name is Sarah. I am 36 years old. I live in Houston, Texas, with my husband Jason and our 2 kids. On paper, I had a good life. Respectable job at a consulting firm, a hardworking husband, 2 healthy children, and a house with a porch swing. From the outside, everything looked right. But inside, I was empty. Jason and I had been married for 13 years. We were never explosive, never wild, but we were solid. Or at least we used to be. Somewhere between school drop-offs and client meetings, the spark faded. The touch stopped lingering. The kisses turned into forehead taps. The sex, when it happened, was more duty than desire. I began to wonder if we were just roommates who shared a mortgage. That was when Dylan came into the picture. He worked in my department. Younger than me by 4 years. Confident in a way that did not feel cocky. He made people laugh easily, especially me. He always complimented my work. Not in a forced way, just enough to make me feel noticed. Then came the small talk by the coffee machine. Then the long glances during meetings. Then the lunch breaks that turned into something more. I told myself we were just friends. That I was just enjoying harmless attention. But I knew I was lying. I started dressing differently. Buying lipstick shades I had not worn since college. Looking for him across the office before I even clocked in. It felt like lighting a match in a dry forest. And I let it burn. The first time we kissed, it was in the back stairwell of our office building. It was fast, forbidden, and everything inside me screamed with guilt. I came home that night and sat across from Jason at dinner like nothing happened. The second time, we ended up in his car. I did not stop him. The third time, I booked a hotel room during a fake, off-site meeting. I wore lace. He peeled it off like he had been waiting forever. We did everything. Every thing. And I never felt more desired, or more disgusting. That night, the night everything unraveled, I came home late. Jason had texted earlier asking if I was safe. I told him I was stuck in a meeting. Another lie. I had just taken a long shower with Dylan. I had laughed in his arms, told him he made me feel alive again. I even told myself I deserved this. That I had been deprived too long. But that all vanished the moment I walked into our room and saw Jason crying. It was not a dramatic cry. There was no yelling, no threats. Just the quiet sound of a man mourning something that had not even been buried yet. He said one thing. I know. That was it. I did not ask how. I did not have to. Whether it was a message, a call he overheard, a gut feeling, I knew I had been sloppy. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to beg. But my feet would not move. My mouth would not open. He finally looked at me, eyes bloodshot, full of something I had never seen in him before, loss. And then he said something that shattered me more than anything else ever could. You were mine. And just like that, I was nothing. I spent that night in the guest room, alone. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. I could still feel Dylan's touch on my body, but all I wanted to do was rip my skin off. I had never cheated in my life. I used to look down on people who did. But now, I was her. I was the woman who broke her husband's heart for a thrill. And Jason's tears were still echoing in my head. The next morning, we did not talk. He made breakfast for the kids. Packed their lunches. Wiped jelly off our daughter's chin like nothing happened. He even kissed her forehead. But he never once looked at me. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any scream ever could. There are certain types of guilt that sit in your chest like a stone, heavy, unmoving, always there. But the guilt I carried after watching my husband cry because of what I did was not just a stone. It was a poison. It spread through everything I touched. It changed how I moved, how I breathed, how I looked at myself in the mirror. Jason did not leave. That was the part that surprised me most. He slept in our bed. I stayed in the guest room. He still helped with the kids. Still made them breakfast. Still folded laundry. But he did it with the expression of a man going through the motions because he no longer had anything left to feel. He stopped touching me. Stopped asking where I was going. Stopped calling me, babe. It was as if his spirit had left the house, but his body stayed behind to finish its obligations. I told myself I deserved the coldness. But nothing could have prepared me for how much his silence would torture me. Dylan was still texting. Still trying to see me. Still using words like need and miss. I read his messages with dead eyes. What once sent a thrill through me now made my stomach churn. I no longer felt excited by his name. I felt disgusted. Not at him, but at myself. I began to ignore his calls. I stopped meeting him after work. I sat in my car more than once, debating whether I should block him entirely. But I did not. Not yet. There was still a part of me that felt too broken to cut all ties. A part of me that still craved escape. But then one morning changed everything. I had gone into Jason's closet to get a hoodie. Something soft, something that still smelled like him. I was not prepared to find the envelope. It was tucked between two pairs of jeans. I opened it and saw a receipt, dated weeks before the night I came home from the hotel. A hotel reservation. A suite. 2 nights. The name on it was Jason's. My hands began to shake. I found more. Emails printed out. Conversations between him and a therapist. Notes about reconnecting, rebuilding intimacy, reigniting emotional bonds. He had been planning something. A surprise, maybe. A getaway to work on us. A desperate attempt to save what I had already broken. That was the moment I collapsed to the floor. He had not given up. He had been fighting for us while I was giving myself away to another man. I sat there on the carpet, crying into the sleeves of his sweatshirt, hating myself in a way I had never known was possible. The affair had been bad enough. But realizing that he had still believed in me, in us, when I had already decided to betray him, felt like acid in my veins. That night, I sat at the dinner table and could barely eat. The kids were laughing about something. Jason smiled at them, gave them his full attention, like nothing in his heart had been torn open. I could not understand it. I wanted him to scream at me. To rage. To tell me what I had done to him. But instead, he got up, kissed our daughter on the forehead, and said he was going to bed early. And just like that, he was gone again, present, but unreachable. I finally blocked Dylan the next morning. I did not say goodbye. I did not explain. I just deleted the thread, removed his number, and erased every picture. It felt like cutting off a limb that had already started rotting. Necessary, but painful. That same day, I sat down and wrote Jason a letter. I could not say it to his face, not yet, but I needed him to know the truth. The whole truth. I told him when it started. Where it happened. How long. What we did. How I felt. What I told myself to justify it. And I ended it with a single sentence. I understand if you never want to touch me again. I placed it on his pillow. He did not bring it up the next morning. He did not mention it at dinner. It took 3 days. On the third night, he walked into the guest room where I had been sleeping and stood at the door. I could not look at him. He said, "I read your letter." I nodded. And then he said something I did not expect. I knew. Not all the details. But I knew something was happening. I could feel it. And I did not say anything, because I thought I was failing you. I turned to him, horrified. No. Jason, this was not your fault. He shook his head. I should have seen how far you were drifting. I should have fought harder. No, I said, my voice breaking. You were fighting. I just stopped showing up. That night, he told me something that I had never known. Something he had never shared. 2 years before the affair, he had gone through a serious depressive episode. One he never told me about because he did not want to burden me. He would drive around after work sometimes just to cry in the car. He would lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would be better off without him. He had felt like he was losing me long before I was gone. And I had never noticed. The weight of those confessions crushed me. I had not just betrayed Jason physically, I had abandoned him emotionally. We were both broken, but neither of us had been brave enough to say it out loud until everything had already fallen apart. That night, we sat on opposite ends of the bed, not touching, not speaking. Just breathing in the same space, finally aware of how deeply we had hurt each other. He did not forgive me that night. He did not promise anything. But before he left the room, he looked at me and said, I still see her. The woman I married. But I do not know if I will ever be able to trust her again. Then he walked out. And I realized that the real consequence of what I had done was not punishment. It was doubt. The kind that seeps into every hug. Every kiss. Every late return home. Love after betrayal does not look like a fairy tale. It does not sound like violin music or feel like warm sun on your skin. It feels like standing barefoot on broken glass, inching forward, one painful step at a time, hoping you will not bleed out before you reach the other side. That is what the weeks felt like after Jason read my letter. After I blocked Dylan. After everything came into the light. I had destroyed the world we built, and now, we were walking through the wreckage in silence. But silence was better than pretending. Silence was honest. Jason agreed to go to counseling. That was the first signal he had not completely shut the door on us. He said he was not ready to forgive me. He said the images in his head still kept him awake some nights. He asked hard questions in those therapy sessions. He wanted details. He wanted timelines. He wanted to know why I gave my body to another man instead of fighting for our marriage. And I answered him. Every question. Every detail. Even when it hurt. Even when it made him cry again. I told the truth. Because lies had already taken too much. We started having separate routines. Separate rooms. Separate meals. But we stayed under the same roof. For the kids, at first. That was what we told ourselves. But somewhere in between soccer practices and Sunday pancakes, something fragile started to grow between us. Not love, not yet. But awareness. We started to see each other, not as enemies, not even as husband and wife, but as two deeply wounded people still breathing in the same storm. Sometimes he would sit next to me on the couch. Not touching me. Just sitting. And we would talk. About the kids. About our pain. About the things we never said during all those years when we were drifting apart in silence. One night, I told him I felt like I had become invisible. Like I had disappeared beneath the roles of wife, mother, employee. I admitted that Dylan made me feel seen, but it was temporary. Addictive. Hollow. Jason listened. Then he told me something that broke my heart all over again. He said, "I saw you. Every day." I just thought I was not enough anymore. That was the hardest truth of all. Because it was not that Jason stopped loving me. It was that I stopped believing I was lovable without chaos. And chaos was what I chased. I remember the first time he touched me again. It was not sexual. We were in the kitchen. I was slicing vegetables. My hands were shaking. He reached over, gently, and took the knife from my hand. "Let me," he said. His hand brushed mine. I felt like crying. Not because it was romantic. But because it was kind. We went on our first walk together in months that following weekend. Just around the block. We did not talk about the past. We just walked. Step by step. Side by side. For the first time, I did not feel the need to apologize again. I knew he knew I was sorry. And I knew he was still deciding whether that would ever be enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night, after we put the kids to bed, he knocked on the guest room door. He stepped inside. Sat down on the edge of the bed. I sat up. And then he said it. "I want to try." 3 words. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Just steady. Real. Earnest. I was so stunned I could not speak. I just nodded, and the tears fell quietly. He reached for my hand. Held it for the first time in months. And whispered, "This is not going to be easy." I whispered back, "I do not want easy. I just want you." We started rebuilding, slowly. Counseling continued. We made a list of rules for healing. No secrets. No sudden schedule changes. Weekly check-ins. Transparent phone use. Shared calendars. Not as control, but as an act of rebuilding trust brick by fragile brick. I learned to sit with discomfort. To hold space for his triggers without making it about my guilt. To understand that forgiveness does not come in one moment, it comes in waves. 6 months later, we took our first trip together since the affair. It was not romantic. It was awkward. Quiet. But we watched the ocean. We talked about our childhoods. We laughed once or twice. And on the last night, he reached for me in bed. There was no lust in that moment. No wild passion. Only permission. Permission to touch. Permission to hold. Permission to begin again, not as who we were, but as who we were becoming. I will never forget what he said afterward. Lying beside me, hand on my waist, he whispered, "I never stopped loving you. But now I have to learn how to love you in a different way." I nodded. Because I was learning too. Learning that love is not always soft or pretty. Sometimes, it is brutal. Sometimes, it is staying when every instinct tells you to run. Sometimes, it is choosing someone after they have hurt you. Not because you forget what they did. But because you see who they are now. Today, we are still healing. Still growing. We still have nights where the silence lingers too long. Still have days where trust feels like a tightrope. But we are showing up. And there is something sacred in that. We are not who we used to be. We are something harder to define. But maybe, something stronger. I once gave my body to another man. And it broke everything. But when Jason cried in front of me that night, something else was born. Not pity. Not shame. But truth. And from that truth, we are learning to build again. Because real love is not what survives the easy. It is what survives the wreckage.